Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is an in-depth breakdown of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2, Through the Valley. It's here. They actually did it. And I can't believe it. Beyond the game-changing heartbreak we've all been dreading, the Battle of Jackson was one of the finest sequences of television I've ever seen that showed how both humanity and its fungal antagonists have adapted in subtle ways. And now I'm asking, who is the real hero of the show? Should I be rooting for the fungus? We reacted to the shocking ending and explained the changes from the game in yesterday's video. Now it is time for our in-depth analysis of all the deeper themes and details that you might have missed. And I don't really have any speculation for events that happened beyond this point in the game, so we're gonna save the spoilers section for next week, but we are renaming it spoilers because I agree with that commenter on last week's video. Spoilers is a much better name for that section, and it was right there. We should have just went with that. Now, before we begin, be sure to check out nerdriot.shop, which is the best way to support us here at New Rockstars with all kinds of great merch options. Like we have this awesome new design based on Ellie's tattoo. We have it on shirts and totes and all kinds of great designs. nerdriot.shop. Okay, we open this historic episode with the sound of the hospital fire alarm blaring over black as Abby is in a dream sequence, remembering her discovering the aftermath of her father's death in St. Mary's Hospital. Actually, we first see Abby's handgun, which is a detail I really appreciate because after she takes her tumble this episode, she spends most of this episode unarmed until she gets her hands on a shotgun and then on, of course, a golf club. I was also reminded of this pretty fun detail in the game that many gamers have noticed. When Joel saves Abby in the game, it's possible in that moment that Abby either is or is not holding a gun, and based on that variation, Joel's dialogue to Abby changes to reflect that.
You got a gun?
Yeah.
Well, I hope you're a good shot. Keep up with us. You good with that gun?
Yeah.
Good. We gotta move.
In this dream, Abby advances slowly toward a brightly lit red exit sign that reflects on the floor and on the walls, so it's kind of like she's walking through a valley to her own hell. Abby is younger here, wearing a polo shirt with a shorter braid, as we are seeing her 5 years younger than she is in the present day. Abby later confirms that she was 19 on this day, which is the same age Ellie is now in the present timeline. A second Abby, 5 years older, a huskier voiced present day Abby, tells her younger self not to go in. So this isn't a flashback to the younger Abby, it's a dream of the older Abby thinking back on this moment. So this opening scene fakes us out with a point of view shift from a 19-year-old to a 24-year-old, which is something this point in the game does, shifting from the point of view of a 19-year-old Ellie to a 24-year-old Abby. So older Abby is having this dream, not just haunted by this memory, but really because she wishes she could tell her younger self not to see what she's about to see. It's telling us that older Abby hates carrying this rage in her heart, and maybe if she didn't see the way Joel left her father, she wouldn't be cursed with vengeance as she now is. And now that we know the truth as of this episode, we can now state that the reason the camera stayed on the dead Dr. Jerry in the season 1 finale for a few extra seconds was to set up what we learned this episode, that that man had a daughter and that daughter was Abby. Older Abby says,
His brains are on the floor.
a specific visceral image that stays with older Abby, and it's why she goes the full par 5, giving Joel head injuries to try to get his brains on the floor of the lodge. But young Abby says,
You're lying.
it's interesting to have her say that because young Abby didn't have to say anything in the scene at all. But to me, this suggests a few things, that this is a recurring dream, or maybe that it started earlier in young Abby's path up through this hospital, and that on multiple steps of this path, young Abby just didn't believe whoever this specter was. But also, you're lying gets to the lies at the heart of this show and how it's an examination of the power of lies. Abby wakes up in her sleeping bag in the lodge, and right away, in the first wide shot, we see her standing to meet Owen. The golf club bag leans against the wall. So gamers know right away what's going to happen in this room. Chekhov's golf clubs. Abby and Manny react to how big and secure Jackson now looks in the daylight, which is one of the great moments of false hope that this episode does too many times, making us think that Abby's crew might turn back and that the walls of Jackson might not be breached. Nora has shaved her head in the past 5 years since we've seen her. All of them, since swapping the Fireflies for the Seattle area WLF, have further hardened their militaristic resolve. They say they saw lights the night before, but Mel thought that the lights were just from little generators like what they use at the FOB. The FOB, or FOB, is the forward operating base used by the WLF as their primary base in the Seattle area. And we're going to see that in future episodes and maybe future seasons. Manny sees Jackson through the binoculars and notes its power lines. Remember, in season 1, Joel and Ellie first pass a hydroelectric dam and plant that still functions to provide electricity to the town of Jackson. They also tease that Jackson has dogs, which we saw checking Joel and Ellie when they first arrived in season 1, and these doggies end up being the heroes of the battle. Abby proposes to kidnap a patrol force to make him talk, and Mel refuses to hurt anyone else other than Joel, but Abby says it's just to bluff and scare them, and when she goes quiet, Owen knows from this moment that Abby would have no problem killing anyone to get to Joel, which we find out in a bit is just to convince Abby to turn back to Seattle. Again, false hope. In Ellie's room, we see the guitar Joel gave Ellie with new strings on the instrument after Joel restrung it the night before. We'll come back to this in a second, but this is the next morning, so technically everything in this episode, including the Battle of Jackson and Joel's death, all happens on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2029. So in future years, Happy New Year is not going to be a fun thing to count down to for Ellie. On Ellie's wall above her bed, beneath the astronaut poster that we talked about last week, is one of Ellie's drawings of Shimmer the horse. In Ellie's diary in part 2 of the game, you can actually see some of Ellie's sketches, including some of Shimmer with the caption, "Shimmer, you move too much." Jesse knocking on Ellie's door from Patrol plays out almost exactly as it does in the game, where part 2 actually starts with Ellie right here, with Jesse talking about the dance the night before, the awkwardness of Ellie kissing Jesse's ex Dina, and Jesse teasing her he's not really that mad about it, etc., etc. Actually, the game only flashes back to actually show the dance much later. That flashback includes Ellie finding Joel on the porch with a guitar, but in the game, there's actually a lot more to that conversation. And the fact that this scene now has the guitar back in Ellie's room confirms that they did likely talk, and future episodes of the season might flash back to that season 2 episode 1 moment to reveal exactly what was said. This would also explain why the next morning Ellie seems to be in a slightly improved place with Joel, wanting to go on patrol with him, and I think it's because she wanted to follow up after some conversation that she had with him on the porch. You've probably noticed by now that we here at New Rockstars create content, a lot of content. Making this much content is hard, but it gets a lot easier when you've got the right tools for the job. And one of those tools we have used to make literally every single piece of content on this channel for years now is Riverside. Riverside is the easiest way for you and your team to record, edit, and share professional grade video content and podcasts from anywhere in the world. There's a couple of features that we specifically like. The main one is that Riverside records your video locally with up to 4K resolution. Even if your internet connection is choppy, your recording isn't. Plus, Riverside is continuously uploading audio and video to the cloud while you record. It's great for peace of mind, but also means that once you're done recording, your files are ready for the rest of your team to work on in seconds. And of course, Riverside gives you separate audio and video tracks of every participant, so you have complete control while you're in post-production. Riverside makes our jobs so much easier. We can't recommend it enough. If you create video or audio content, check out Riverside. Click the link in the description to start for free and use code Rockstars for 20% off a yearly plan. On Ellie's door is another page of her diary from the game, a drawing of a snow-covered tree with a previous passage referring to Dina with "Don't fuck up your friendship," with the inscription by the tree, "We lost the ground to snow, step on the ice, and then feel my thaw," crossed out, then test my thaw. There's some debate over what this poem means, and most believe it's connected to her fight with Joel, but the thaw might be referring to her feelings toward Dina. On the right of the door, we see the album and track list for the Strokes' 2001 album, Is This It?, another one of the most recent rock album releases before Outbreak Day in 2003. In the game, Ellie and Jesse's morning walk through Jackson is how we get to see the expanded layout of the city, and in the game, it's just another normal day. But now on the show, we see preparations for city defenses that we later get to see pay off, like the rolling of oil drums. Jesse tells Ellie how some dead infected were found frozen in the snow, with live infected beneath them using those bodies as insulation. And I gotta say, I'm actually relieved that the town of Jackson responds to these kind of threats that started being posed in episode 1 with this smart caution. Like, I was worried last week that this was gonna be a classic arrogant caught with your pants down situation like Alexandria in The Walking Dead. Instead, we get to see how and why Jackson survived these past attacks from raiders and infected, and see how they've applied those lessons. Ellie says that she wants to patrol with Joel and that her shit with Joel is complicated, but despite it being bad,
I'm still me, he's still Joel, and nothing's ever gonna change that.
So yeah, definitely, there must have been more to that conversation on the porch, and we're probably gonna see it in a future episode. We also learned that Joel has already gone out on patrol with Dina, which is another divergence from the game. In the game, this moment leads to Ellie and Dina going out on patrol, which includes the visit to Green Place Market moment that we saw in episode 1, and in the game, it's Ellie and Dina together in Eugene's weed greenhouse, while Joel is out with Tommy, and it's Joel and Tommy together when they meet Abby. They swapped it around so that Dina could be in the lodge to see the WLF patch, and so that Jesse could be the one to deliver to Ellie some of the Eugene exposition to set up the season 2 mystery that is unique to the show, and so that Tommy could be in Jackson as a hero point of view character for this new battle. Tommy runs through the emergency plan, quizzing the town on the drill, kids and elderly to the basements, able-bodied adults to the roofs, and safety's on since Earl shot himself in the leg last week. Earl is actually one of the Jackson residents you meet in part 1 of the game, a worker at the power plant. Tommy also says if there's a breach,
stay off the main street.
I feel like Tommy may be remembering how fast things escalated on the main street of Austin as he, Joel, and Sarah were fleeing. As in the game, Maria makes Ellie face Seth's apology, and it seems genuine.
I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have even thought it.
And he gives them the steak sandwiches like he does in the game, but also, as in the game, Ellie's reluctant to accept this apology. And I like how this demonstrates a generational divide between pre-outbreak adults who believed redemption and forgiveness was possible, and post-outbreak youth who might have a colder, more fixed mindset Wild West approach to handling conflict. Abby sees a patrol down below, which might actually be Joel and Dina, ironically enough, and says, it as she goes after them. I think it's her realizing that Owen wasn't really out there for an hour, and he probably plans to try to talk her out of it. As the blizzard intensifies, Jesse and Ellie stash their horses in a car wash filled with some hay and go into a 7-Eleven where Jesse shows Ellie Eugene's weed greenhouse, a greenhouse that Eugene claimed he found and then hid from Maria and showed Jesse when they used to be patrol partners. Again, in the game, Ellie finds this with Dina, and it's not in a 7-Eleven, but in a bigger underground room, and Ellie and Dina end up lighting up and hooking up. Now, we don't get that in this episode, but I'm thinking that there will be future Ellie Dina moments coming up in episodes ahead. The show wanted to make this location a setup for the mystery of what happened with Joel and Eugene. The way Ellie responds to hearing Eugene's name and Ellie finding his Firefly medallion seem to indicate that she knows more about why Joel killed Eugene. Reminder that Eugene is different in the game. Instead of being married to a Jackson therapist named Gail, Eugene in the game, we find out, left his wife and daughter and died of natural causes in Jackson before the events of part 2 of the game. They are changing the character in the show, and we'll see him in a flashback episode in the future, played by Joe Pantoliano. Jesse says Eugene was a Firefly who quit in 2010 because he was tired of killing people. 2010 would be 7 years after Outbreak Day, when Tommy was also serving with the Fireflies, along with Eugene in the Denver area, and 13 years before Joel and Ellie first arrived at Jackson. And Jesse says it was a raw deal what happened to Eugene.
What are you gonna do? Couldn't be saved.
I like that Mason and Druckmann structured in this mystery that's specific to the show to keep the people who know what's going to happen from the games invested in what's coming. And since it's not at all in the game, I am comfortable speculating outside any spoilers section. I think maybe Eugene's past Firefly connections might have kept him in touch with people from Salt Lake City, and Eugene might have known what Joel did, and certainly I think Eugene deduced that Ellie is immune, and Joel killed Eugene to silence him, and then ended up inventing some story about Eugene going crazy, or maybe just getting bitten, and he might have staged Eugene getting bitten. Because it's also implied in the game that Abby finds out that Joel is in Jackson from someone who spotted him in the area, and I think in the show they might say that it was Eugene as a connecting tissue. Like he might have been selling some pot to others in the West and Pacific Northwest, and maybe he just mentioned it casually that this guy named Joel just moved in, and then maybe he brought this up to Joel, and Joel just got really pissed and realized, damn it, I have to tie up this loose end. So it's either that and or Eugene found out that Ellie is immune. Again, I have not seen future episodes, but I'm just feeling it's gonna be something like that. So Abby slips down an incline into this kind of graveyard for frozen infected. And as she gets to her feet, you can see right away that not only does she no longer have a rifle, look at the holster on her sidearm is gone. She is unarmed. A frozen clicker begins to move, and at first we're thinking, ice zombie, come to life, until we realize Jesse's warning from earlier has been true. The cordyceps have adapted to a new hunting strategy of using frozen infected as insulation from the cold, and they are doing it in huge numbers. This is also not exactly in the game, at least not on this scale, but it is based on a moment when you're playing as Abby at this point in the blizzard, and at one point an infected springs up out of the snow, crawling out and surprising you. They expanded the concept here to make it an example of how cordyceps is adapting to be more collectively predatory. And think about this, infected don't actively drag bodies of each other and burrow underneath them, at least I don't think they do. So what must have happened was a pairing of infected, or maybe a small group of infected, instinctively collapsed on top of each other when the temperature dropped and when the snow started to fall. And in doing so, they did a loving embrace to sacrifice one for the benefit of the other. And it probably started small with just two, right? Just too. And those two inspired others who wandered to this area and did the same, one after another, and in each pairing, a sacrificial shield infected, and then one protected infected being incubated. It's like the two fungal strands in the now colder opening credits. These fungi love each other. They have their own kind of biological love. The result is an avalanche of runners and clickers, recalling the epic Game of Thrones Hardhome episode. In the game, Abby does have to sprint through a swarm of infected in the blizzard, but it's not like an organized horde that actively has awareness and turns to attack something else. It doesn't spring up like a perfect trap like this. But I actually really like the change in the show because it implies that Abby lit that spark. She triggered the tripwire by insisting on moving forward with her vengeance. Like it was gonna happen no matter what, but Abby made it twice as worse. And I like how we focus on this one female runner in a jean jacket that crawls out of the snow. This is the same runner that catches up to Abby when she's climbing on the ladder and almost pulls her down. Abby gets to the copper mine and rounds the corner by a fence, and just seeing this fence triggers players of the game because this is one of the most iconic moments, recreated perfectly here in live action. While in the game, you're playing as Abby and you're feeling that claustrophobia and panic. Director Mark Mylod does a great job of stretching out the moment even further, using a camera tracking shot to make the path under the bulging fence feel even longer and never ending, and including some gruesome inserts like the hand pressing through the chain link. And it's so important to get this right. It's a key moment because we have to root for Abby to survive here right before Abby meets Joel and we remember why she's here. Yes, just like in the game, Joel's gun enters the frame and kills the runner who tackles Abby, saving her life. And there's a beat before we realize Joel is the one who saved her. But TV viewers here get a clue in that the hand that reaches down to help Abby to her feet has Joel's busted wristwatch that was given to him by Sarah. Abby realizes that the man who saved her life is the Joel, as Dina says Joel's name, and Abby quietly processes the awkwardness that this guy saved her, also that she's unarmed, and she focuses on Joel's gun, and then she pitches the lodge as somewhere for them to go. Back at the 7-Eleven, Ellie finds a gas mask with a bong attached, just like Ellie and Dina find in Eugene's weed farm in the game. But it's interesting that they find a gas mask because in the game, gas masks are more commonplace because you have to worry about airborne spores in all kinds of places. The show did not include airborne spores in season 1. They actually do come up later in this season based off of trailer footage, but it would mean that Eugene would just have one of these for another reason. Ellie takes this mask and takes a whole bunch of weed, so I assume that she and Dina are, gonna be partying in the future. From here, the editing of the episode deserves its own Emmy because we intercut from the discovered cordyceps strands in the pipe to Joel, Dina, and Abby fleeing the Horde as more of them spring up, conveying to the viewer how the fungal hive mind works. The tendrils sense the living humans in the town, and a new group of buried infected get triggered by that same instinct to join the first group that was chasing Joel, Dina, and Abby to redirect the entire Horde someplace else. Again, this is a change from the game, and I shouldn't even call it hive mind because, funguses don't have brains this way, but they do have like a shared biological instinct to spread, and that's really what we're seeing. But in the game, what seems like a smaller Horde chases Joel and the rest all the way to the lodge, but here, their hive mind instinct lures them away down the valley to Jackson. So again, either way, with the pipe routes, there would have been a Horde attacking the city, but the Abby avalanche made that Horde at least twice as big as it would have been. The people of Jackson ring the bell, and it is on. Whereas before they were good-natured and laughing about these drills, now a very real fear takes over their faces. The parallels to Helm's Deep and Lord of the Rings Two Towers begin. The children, mothers, and elderly find refuge, while the battlements are armed with defenses that we don't see pay off initially, but when they do later, it's awesome. And I love the intercutting shot of the human boots jogging up the stairs to the infected feet sprinting through the snow. We see some men strapped with flamethrower tanks. One in particular looks completely terrified, and it's gonna be interesting how this pays off in a few minutes. A tractor pushes heavy trucks with beds filled with very heavy crates right up against the gates, while men put firewood behind the tires to keep them from rolling back. It's all so smart and practical, clearly learned from past raids and swarms. As Tommy looks out over the walls, some of the runners have like a crazy movement, and Craig Mason said that some of these runners were stunt actors, some were CGI, and when he was watching back, he couldn't tell which was which. And this one on the right, he assumed was CGI, but it was actually just a stuntman running real weird as an acting choice, and they kept it in. So the front line infected smack into the walls like ants do, because this fungus knows that the first ones are just going to be mass to build the mound that future runners will climb up. We saw a similar thing in World War Z. Tommy waits to deploy the oil drums until after the initial wave of runners, because they need a bit more of a crowd for that fire to be maximally effective. So they also don't blow them up right away and shoot a few holes in the drums to douse several runners with the fuel first. This way, when they blow up the drums, the fire would spread to a lot of those already doused runners. So this way, the The explosions have multiple benefits. Obviously fun boom booms to blow up runners, but also a line of fire that outer runners would now have to pass through that would start to slow them down and wear them down, as well as a kill box closer to the walls to trap a fixed amount of runners in where they could start to pick them off with the rifles. Meanwhile, Joel and Dina see Jackson on fire, and Abby now has to urge Joel to keep going to the lodge. Abby and Joel are seeing that the cold is really starting to get to Dina, and now we see the payoff of Joel calling Dina kiddo in episode 1 and having her as a kind of a secondary daughter figure, because it's his love and concern for Dina that keeps him from going back to Jackson, instead going forward to get Dina someplace warm. It's always love that motivates these characters, both in good places and to their own dooms. Insert shots focus on the rifle shells piling up on the walkways, and there's some false hope as it seems like the shooters are holding back the Horde, but then the Horde redirects by instinct to a different part of the walls, and we hear it before we see it. The roar of the Bloater seems to be commanding the infected, reminding me of Ugluk in Two Towers and Gothmog in Return of the King. There's always one bigger one who's got a big old horn. Now, there is no Bloater in Jackson that we see at this point of the game, but I like putting a Bloater here because, you know, Bloaters are super fun, they're crazy, and really I think the Bloater is representative of the growing scale of the infected army that are now collectively organizing. The humans aren't fighting like a disconnected horde, they're fighting one giant fungus monster with one giant brain, or whatever the fungal counterpart to a brain is. Compared to the Bloater that we saw in season 1 in Kansas City, this Bloater is even taller, 10 to 12 feet, and Tommy, just seeing it, tells him that they are going to be using this thing to breach the walls at a different point, kind of like the Torch Runner sprinting to the black powder charges at Helm's Deep that created the explosion that ultimately breached those walls. Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, Outbreak Day was in September 2003. Return of the King hadn't come out yet, but Tommy would have just seen Two Towers, so you know Helm's Deep probably inspired a lot of their actual construction of the defenses of this town. So Tommy falls back to join the Flamethrower guys, and 2 of the 4 break the line and flee. And I think my favorite detail is the one who we got a close-up of earlier, looking super scared, doesn't run. He holds the line. It just shows that just because someone looks afraid doesn't mean that the flight is going to overtake the fight. Everyone's afraid, but we all handle our fear differently. Sadly, this guy who stays does get overtaken by runners. I'm just very proud of him. As the Horde swarms the main street, some crash through the bakery, knocking over loaves of bread. Just a reminder that bread and flour were what started all of this as the initial substrate. Maria starts shooting at the Bloater, and it has enough awareness to know which of these annoying non-fungi are breaking off chunks of it, which also speaks to the heightened range awareness of the fungi on the show versus the game. Tommy also sees the Bloater's head turn and runs into the infected toward the Bloater, hoping nearby shooters will cover his 6, and then gets a few shots at the Bloater, just enough to get it to turn away from Maria, and it works. And I like how Maria sees Tommy doing this, but doesn't have time to go after her husband, because she knows that's not what he wants her to do, and she continues firing at the runners, just having to trust that Tommy can handle himself now. Tommy rounds a corner into a closed-off alley, and he sees the Bloater rounding the corner reflected in the glass, and he readies himself. Craig Mason compared this one-on-one conflict of Tommy versus the Bloater as a way to zoom into the battle, similar to Private Mellish fighting the German with the knife in the closed quarters inside and saving Private Ryan while the battle raged outside. Tommy repels the Bloater with a flamethrower, which scorches its fungal armor, but doesn't kill it at first. Fire is one way you can try to hold off a Bloater, specifically from Molotov cocktails. Those are arguably the best way to bring down a Bloater in the game, but that's partly just from the concussive blast of it, blowing off pieces of the armor. So really, shotgun blasts are also super helpful to chip away at that armor, and really, no matter what, it's just gonna take forever to bring a Bloater down, as it does here. And it's very scary. Tommy depletes his tanks, and the Bloater just keeps moving forward, but luckily, that fire has cooked its way through the body enough that it drops dead. And I love the detail of the fungus on the headstalks melting and bubbling. And while this kind of feels like an anticlimax of the battle, it's really just because it's setting up a way more thrilling climax as Maria runs to the kennels and Tommy is trudging out onto the main street, just tired, shooting like Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan, saved miraculously by the planes. But here, the saviors are these proud puppies. Actually, the way the charge of the Rohirrim ended the Battle of Helm's Deep. These dogs were the decisive charge here. We needed this win as a false victory to precede what comes next. And brace yourselves. And by the way, since, our proud papa is about to die, I am wearing this Joel jacket, which our friends from Huckberry hooked up with us. And if you click the link in the description, you too can get outerwear just like this. And it's a really great jacket. And it supports new Rockstars directly. Okay, here we go. Joel, Dina, and Abby make it to the lodge, and Abby tells Owen to help them too, so that Joel doesn't get suspicious that everyone in this room hates him. As Mel tends to Dina spots a WLF patch, which will be a key detail next week as she recalls who these people are. While Joel wants to head back to Jackson to help them, Abby slows things down to introduce everyone one by one so that she will have a way to non-discreetly tell the rest of the room that this is Joel, the Joel.
And he is Joel.
And they all take it in. And before we know it, Manny has Dina at gunpoint. In the game, since Tommy is there, they knock out Tommy immediately. And that's how Joel knows that these guys mean business. Instead, with Dina, they gently sedate her, which I think might be my one gripe with this episode, because I get why they swapped Tommy and Dina and Jesse, because they need what follows to be just an intimate exchange without anyone else shouting over it until Ellie gets there. So Dina needs to be knocked out, but I get why they're like, well, if they were to pistol whip Isabella Merced, people would worry that she's dead. But I feel like they could have just gagged her or moved her to another room or something like that. This just feels a little tedious, but I get I'm nitpicking. Abby gives Joel a chance to save Dina's life, which is also a new detail to the show, so that before Joel dies, he can feel like he spared his other daughter figure. Joel confesses that the last place he saw the Fireflies was indeed at St. Mary's, and Joel passes that test, even though technically the last former Firefly that he would have seen would have been Eugene, and he killed that Firefly. So while Abby praises him for being honest, he wasn't being entirely honest here. This is just another example of him lying to spare a young girl that he loves. So the characters spend a lot more time talking here. In the game, it's pretty immediate when Abby blows out Joel's leg with a shotgun. But here, Abby waits on the other side of the confession, and it comes after he says this.
I saved your life.
What life?
Like in the game, Mel tourniquets Joel's leg so that Abby can make this slow. But also in the game, Joel cuts off Abby. She doesn't get to make her speech.
Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed? Get this over with.
In this scene in the episode, before Abby says you don't get to rush this, there is a lot more of a conversation. Abby asks Joel if he even knows how many Fireflies he kills, if he counted as he went. While the season 1 finale showed Joel moving methodically through the hospital while the camera lingered on the corpses, Joel did not. And now we kind of feel like that camera were the people Joel left behind to come after him. Abby reports it was 18 soldiers and 1 doctor.
That was my dad.
So confirmed, the surgeon Joel shot in the operating room was Dr. Jerry Anderson, Abby's father, and it was his grave that Abby draped the Firefly medallion over. It's a big deal that Joel learns this information before he dies, and that we, the viewers, learn it now. In the game, you don't learn this connection until much later, and Joel actually dies without ever knowing. And it's part of the reason players of the game felt so much emotional whiplash having to suddenly play as a character that they hated so much. But seeing a live-action actor playing this anti-hero in the medium of television as opposed to a game, the audience psychology is just different. I went into this distinction in yesterday's video. But Abby says that the nurses in the room said Joel didn't look at the surgeon, but that she looked at this doctor.
I was 19.
Joel learns that the age Abby was, and we realize it's the same age, 19, that Ellie is now. Moments like this are part of why I think they cast Caitlin Dever as Abby, despite the visual differences to the build of the game version of Abby. I think the audience needs to see Abby as a future version of Ellie, exactly 5 years down a very vengeful, bitter road after losing her dad. And if you do some subtraction there, we can see young Abby in the dream memory of the opening scene as what Ellie is now, about to walk into the worst thing she'll ever see. Abby says that their commander in Seattle, referring to Isaac, trained them to never kill the defenseless, as Joel is now, and Abby rubs her thumb on Joel's head, which I interpret as the Catholic sacrament of last rites, which involves anointing the forehead of a dying person with oil. Caitlin Dever reportedly lost her mother to cancer in the days before filming the scene. She had actually just come back from her mother's funeral. And maybe this is all just on my mind because I lost my dad in the past year. He actually received last rites. So this episode just hit me in all kinds of ways, especially the emotional truth that Caitlin Dever brought to this scene. Abby says,
There are just some things everyone agrees are just wrong.
In response to this, Pedro Pascal does the slightest nod, and that is a very important detail because it shows that Joel might feel somewhere deep down that he deserves this death, and he might feel that as a man now in his 60s, if you were to find some elderly war criminal who murdered someone he loved, even if that person did that for valid reasons to them, those reasons wouldn't matter to him, and he'd probably do the same thing Abby is doing now. I also think the show kept the nod in as a kind of meta message from the actor that he is okay with what's happening. He signed on for this role, and he and the show are kind of giving Abby permission to end the character here. And only now, in this moment, does Abby look over to see the golf clubs, and Abby takes a certain smug satisfaction, and I think that is what pisses Joel off.
I have waited
Just shut the f up and do it already.
Whatever moment of understanding that might have existed between them is now broken, and I think Joel, having lived with Ellie's bullshit for so long, really knows how to piss off a young woman like this fastest by just trying to silence her because he wants it to end. And as Abby does in the game, she says her final words.
You don't get to rush this.
You don't get to rush this.
And Abby starts swinging away. Actually, on the third swing, listen closely, and I'm sorry to make you listen closely. Now, we don't see it, but you can hear the golf club breaking on that one. That's another difference from the game. The golf club never breaks in the game, and I think this is a good change because golf clubs typically don't have the tensile strength not to break if you were to do this. Like sometimes when PGA golfers hit a triple bogey, just the turf can break a club, but also by breaking the golf club, it sets up the instrument for Joel's inevitable death. But we cut back to Ellie riding up outside, and we see her through the window initially as Abby is now using her fists, which is more false hope. We think that Ellie might just get there in time to save Joel. Owen says,
Abby. Abby.
Abby's inability to hear Owen parallels Ellie not listening to Jesse during her sparring session back in 201. Both Abby and Ellie reach a certain point where they can just go deaf with rage. Ellie passes a baby crib with a discarded stuffed bear, which is a grim detail that I don't remember from the game. Ellie definitely enters the lodge from a higher level, passing a billiard table, and then goes down to the main floor and then down to the basement. So here, I think the baby crib reminds us of the last time Ellie was orphaned on the day of her birth from Anna. Now in the game, the scene of Joel's death actually takes place in the darker basement level with a much lower ceiling, and the cramped nature of the game scene for many makes it feel like a deeper, darker, colder hell for Ellie and for Joel. But setting the show version of the death scene on the main level, it does make it feel brighter and loftier, which I agree you might not like. Practically, it gives the scene the benefit of more natural light and a few more inventive angles like the overhead shot later. But you know what? I hear you if you prefer the basement setting because it does make Joel feel more like a hunted game that's being slaughtered on a kill floor. But just as that happens in the game, Ellie enters and Manny grabs her when she comes in. She cuts him with her switchblade and then he kicks her in response. They hold Ellie's face down and she calls to Joel, and just as he does in the game, his finger twitches, which at first we don't know if it's him trying to reach out to her or just posthumous muscle spasms. But remember, in the earlier episodes of season 1, twitching fingers were, we thought, a sign of an infected, and it's also what Joel's hand did after he punched that Fedra guy to death. So it's just never a good sign on this show, or at least it's not a sign of life. Ellie begs Joel to get up and he starts to rise, which is more false hope, but there's just something in Joel's fatherly instincts that kicks in to try to ease Ellie's pain. But we know it's hopeless because the focus shifts to Abby's boot and the broken, sharp golf club that Ellie only now sees. And now Bella Ramsey lets out a feeble, girlish no that kind of sounds just as heartbreaking as Ashley Johnson's voice did in the game.
No.
Abby uses the broken end to stab Joel in the neck, and the world goes silent. Now, in the game, it's actually just one final skull-shattering blow with the club that makes the world go silent. But in the medium of TV, we've seen characters take beatings and recover from them, so it kind of needs to be a final deadly strike like this. Also, a stab to the neck is also how Ellie would bring down clickers, so Ellie knows what this means. Bella Ramsey does such an amazing job going from grief to trembling rage.
I'm gonna kill you. You're gonna die. You're all gonna die!
Manny kicks her in the stomach to shut her up. Now in the game, Manny kicks her in the face, knocking her out. So that after this, Ellie only has one final look at Joel's body when Dina finds her. But now, Ellie stays conscious for all of it, but she still cannot breathe. She probably has broken ribs. Craig Mazin said that this is important because it means that Ellie feels like she might be dying now too, which informs this new moment that's not in the game as Ellie crawls over to Joel's body, which Craig Mazin said was her thinking that she is also dying in this moment and wanting to be with Joel in death. But holding his his hand was also something Ellie did with Joel in season 1, episode 7, the last time he was this close to death and nearly died. So she circles back with this instinctive gesture. And again, I hate to bum you out, but it is the same loving embrace we now know that pairs of cordyceps do in the ice. Ellie actually yanks out the golf club, and I've been listening to Craig Mazin for years on the Script Notes podcast, and there's a great episode where he and John August discuss the way that injuries and medical treatment are depicted on shows, and that you should never, ever, ever remove a stabbed object from a wound until you're at the hospital with medical professionals and they can properly treat the wound. But it doesn't matter now. Joel's dead. The overhead shot of Ellie laying beside Joel reminds us of the overhead shot of her in the fetal position in the start of season 1, episode 2, and having a loftier room compared to a basement works, at least for this final shot of the lodge, showing their bodies and the broken golf club. The closing music is a cover of Through the Valley, which again is the episode title, quoting Psalm 23, the famous funeral passage. But it also applies to Abby's group literally walking through a valley to get to and from the Jackson area. But the singer who covers this is Ashley Johnson herself, the actress behind Ellie in the game. She recorded this song for a trailer for The Last of Us Part 2 game, and she's actually sung the song in a number of other events. And since Ashley Johnson played Ellie's mother Anna on the series, hearing her voice now is kind of like a ghostly presence trying to guide Ellie through her grief. We see the aftermath of the Battle of Jackson, one soldier showing a bite mark and grimly hands his gun to another guy to kill him. Whoa! And as I'm looking at the overhead shot of the street, you can see a couple of dogs still gnawing on infected, and thankfully I don't see any dead dogs. I feel like Craig Mazin might have earned back the trust of dog lovers after Chernobyl episode 4. Tommy tells Maria, presumably about Joel, if Jesse had radioed back now that the storm is lifted, though we don't really know for sure. It might just be exhaustion, but either way, he collapses in her arms. Our final shot of the episode shows Jesse riding with Ellie as Dina rides beside them, and they're towing Joel's corpse wrapped in a sheet, his neck still bleeding from the wound through those sheets. We're reminded of Gail's painting of the 2 horses in her home and the riderless horse. They would have had to leave Joel's horse behind, and that's what his destiny ended up being. What strikes me the most about this final shot is not Ellie, but Dina. Isabella Merced's head is slumped over, the sedatives I assume still wearing off, but she is also comatose with grief, as these 2 past episodes have shown that Joel really left 2 daughters behind. A magnificent episode that's going to be staying with me for a long time, and I want to hear your thoughts. How did you react to this episode? Comment down below, and I want to give a special thanks to our YouTube members, Frederick Price, Jeremy Dunham, TDS on a Quest, Cameron, Marissa Miranda, Rick Denmon, and Smokey the Bear, who all support us at the executive producer level. You can follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.